The biggest question is, will the International Monetary Fund one day hold XRP as a reserve asset? What could drive the world's most influential financial institution to consider cryptocurrency built for speed and liquidity? In recent IMF research, XRP is signaled out for its potential to modernize cross-border payments and even integrate with central bank digital currency projects. If XRP ever lands in the IMF's basket, it wouldn't be just news. It would be a paradigm shift and the future of money. I wanted to explore what partnerships Ripple, XRP, the IMF, and central banks currently have, and where could this all be going. It's going to be jam-packed. Let's just get into it.
What does it mean to the IMF, and what is the IMF's interest in it?
Thank you, Brad. IMF is devoting a lot of attention to fintech, and in particular blockchain. But we think that it's difficult to talk about blockchain without considering it in the light of the other new technologies that are forming part of the fintech debate. And we include a lot of different technologies in this space, within this concept, including, of course, the internet and cloud computing, distributed ledgers and blockchain, of course, and the crypto assets that are associated with them, big data and artificial intelligence, biometric data, application program interfaces, and of course, mobile phone technology. And, you know, our 189 member countries, or many of them, are coming to the IMF for advice, given their interest in these issues, looking for guidance as to how to approach and unlock the potential of fintech, while at the same time putting in place regulation that guards against the risks. So right now, the IMF is doing a lot of work in this space, and it consists of several different initiatives. First of all, we have a very active program of research and publication. We published major studies on what were then called virtual currencies, aka crypto assets, and on the potential impact of fintech on the cross-border payments market. We are engaging very closely with the private sector and the industry, and last year put in place a high-level advisory group of industry leaders from the private and public sectors to help guide us in our work on fintech. I'm very happy to say that Cas Laurens, one of the co-founders of Ripple, and Supnendo Mohante from the Monetary Authority of Singapore are both part of that group, and we're very grateful for the advice that they give us. And thirdly, we're engaging very actively with our member countries, using our convening power to bring them together to discuss experiences in unlocking the potential of fintech and blockchain, but also in beginning to design regulatory frameworks that help mitigate the potential risks.
Let me go ahead and show you some of these connections here. The IMF, Ripple, and XRP are significant and multifaceted, involving advisory roles, collaborations, and recognition of XRP's potential in global financial system. 1. Ripple was selected to serve on the IMF's high-level advisory group of fintech. You just heard Cas Laurens was a part of that group. I'm going to show you who is all in that group here in just a few minutes. This advisory group involves providing policy recommendations, especially for small island nations, and supporting cross-border remittance improvements. Remember when Ripple did a public CBDC with Palau? It was a dollar base. I do believe that was a testing ground to show that the technology could work. Ripple's technology and expertise in distributed ledger technology are recognized as valuable for financial innovation while preserving sovereign rights. The CEO, Ripple CEO Brad Garlinghouse, has pitched XRP directly to the IMF, highlighting XRP's advantages in speed, cost efficiency, and liquidity for cross-border payments. XRP is presented as a solution to the current pre-funding challenges of international transactions. Right now, I've seen the numbers as high as like $25 trillion, but realistically, there's anywhere from 10 to $20 trillion locked up all over the world in these pre-funded accounts. Using something like RippleNet and XRP, you could pull all of that money back and start putting it to good use in those countries and in those financial institutions. Think of the new loans and businesses and growth that could be created by just being able to start using that capital for good instead of just having it being stale around the world. The IMF has acknowledged XRP as a promising digital asset that could substantially reduce cost and increase efficiency in cross-border payments, especially benefiting remittance-dependent countries. The IMF sees XRP as a potential bridge currency. You start to look at the top 10, 20, 50 tokens. There's only a few that fit this model of bridge currency. They're not going to use Bitcoin for international payments and transactions. They're going to want to use something that you can go into any currency, into XRP, and out the other side in any currency tokenization asset that you want, or you can do gold, silver, whatever it is that you're currently looking for. XRP could be the bridge through the entire world. It does talk about for interoperability among different national currencies and even central bank digital currencies. The IMF's technical assistance team has been involved in Ripple-led projects such as the Ripple-Palau partnership, indicating practical collaboration beyond discussions. This cooperation aligns with IMF goals of improving financial resilience and payment systems in developing regions. Also, Ripple's broader regulatory and fintech engagements, including work with over 40 regulators worldwide, including the Bank of England, the Federal Reserve, the Saudi Arabian Monetary Authority. Ripple's advisory influence within the IMF and other institutions highlights its strategic role in shaping the global fintech and payment standards. Now, listen, you have to be in the room to be able to participate at this level and scale. Ripple was invited by all of these biggest financial institutions in the world to come up with ideas and how to plan the path forward. You don't see the H bars or not. I'm not trying to hit on H bar or Litecoin or any other thing. I'm trying to say that there's very few companies that Ripple that have been able to get into these meetings with some of these high level nations and central banks. The IMF's legal framework currently prevents it from holding crypto assets like XRP directly unless such assets are adopted by at least one country as its official currency. So this is one of the things holding back the IMF from being able to buy or acquire XRP. There would be a country globally that would need to adopt XRP as its national currency. Could that happen? That is something that we are going to explore. What is an SDR? An SDR is an international reserve asset. The SDR is not a currency, but it's the value. It's based on the basket of 5 currencies: the US dollar, the euro, the Chinese renminbi, Japanese yen, and the British pound sterling. But you start to wonder, is the IMF going to look at ESDRs, which are electronic SDRs, which is cryptocurrency? If the electronic SDR based on XRP were to move forward, it would represent a historic pivot for both global reserve systems and XRP adoption. This would require significant consensus at the IMF and among other central banks, along with regulatory clarity and technical readiness. The likely process for an ESDR for XRP is the IMF policy shift. The process would begin with an IMF-led review involving policy discussions about updating the definition of a reserve asset and SDR basket criteria to include digital assets like XRP. Central bank buy-in, major IMF stakeholders, notably the US, EU, China, Japan, and the UK, would need to support the change. Now, we've seen collaboration with the US, Japan, the UK, and the EU around Ripple, right? Ripple was just at the high-level advisory board meeting. We know Ripple is all over Europe right now and in Japan. So you start to wonder, could this be a possibility? Could these nations then put some pressure on the IMF and say XRP is going to be this global asset? We do want you to start holding it as an ESDR. I think that would be what could happen here. You would need 85% voting threshold required for an SDR basket modification. So you would need 85% to go along with this. I wonder what the US, EU, Japan, and China together hold. Is that high enough, or does China hold, 15, 20%? That would be an interesting thing to follow up on. Global regulatory alignment. There would need to be clear global standards regarding this legal compliance and risk status for XRP as a reservable asset. This likely follows the SEC major jurisdiction and regulatory clarity. There would also need to be infrastructure integration. The IMF and central banks would need to ensure their accounting, settlement, and reporting systems are fully integrated with the XRP ledger, which could be done pretty simply, I would imagine. Allocation and issuance. Member states would be allocated ESDRs, potentially represented as tokenized claims of XRP, which then could circulate and settle through approved custodians or smart contracts on the XRP ledger. So there is a possibility for this to happen, and this is how that would need to go through. You also have this question that I've seen 100 times, but you have to start to wonder here. It does feel like the conversation, the question has already been asked. Let me show you.
You want to take one? Go for it. The first one's for you. IMF. Do you see IMF holding crypto assets in the future? I did not put that up there.
I mean,
Remember, I'm from the legal department. I'm supposed to be very conservative about these things. I don't want to go into great details about
Maybe I should take what he's going to do. I think we stunned Ross into silence with that one.
For that to happen, okay, under the current legal framework, some country would have to use a crypto asset as its currency.
under the current legal framework, they could change the legal framework to fit XRP if they truly wanted to, but it does feel like the conversation has already been made. And you also have the IMF calling for a unified ledger for faster payments. You start to wonder, what could this unified ledger truly be? We know that Chainlink is important for data and oracles, but it's not really this unified ledger that these institutions and IMFs are talking about. You don't see Chainlink at the IMF. You don't see them here at the Bank of England. You know, they are starting to get some connections with the Federal Reserve, but it's really not a settlement asset. So you start to wonder, like, what else could fill that void, to fill that gap, to have those connections? Let me play this.
Advocating to think about this world of digital money as a global public good. And in a recent discussion in Zurich, where we both were, what we advocated for is to have a public platform. So when protocols are agreed, this public platform can connect different CBDCs. There can be interoperability the same way you would transfer euros from one country to another. You do it using CBDCs.
Now, we do know that 98% of countries are moving forward with some type of CBDC, whether it's testing, piloting, or full out rollout. You do see Ripple said that they are working with over 24 central banks around the world. We've only heard reporting on 6 or 7 of those 24. You start to wonder why we haven't heard any information on the rest. I got that number from James Wallace directly from Ripple, who manages all of the CBDC stuff. Here is that high-level advisory group. You do see Cas Laurens here, but take a look here at some of these. You got Circle, BBVA, DTCC, Monetary Authority of Singapore, the IMF. You have some truly historic names. Bank of Indonesia, MIT here, Monetary Authority of Singapore, some really, really big names. And you've seen these pictures before. I've shown them. Brad Garlinghouse, here's Jess Chang of the IMF, here's Christine Lagarde, formerly of the IMF, now the head of the European Central Bank, and you have all of these other institutional players here from the Monetary Authority of Singapore. You have people here from Hong Kong Global Finance. I mean, just it's truly, truly incredible. And then you do have a ton of stuff from the World Economic Forum talking about debt tokenized fund valued at 1 billion on the XRP ledger. They've looked at this, they've tested it, and this has been going on for over 10 years. This goes back to 2018. I can show you some information back in 2015 and 2016 when they started to release to talk about this, and you do start to wonder, what could all of this mean for Ripple and XRP going forward? And man, lots of really cool things happening here. It does talk about XRP speed and transactions, but what do you think is going to happen here, guys? Do you think one day Ripple XRP will become an ESDR, that the IMF and other central banks will hold it? We do know that central banks have talked about holding crypto assets. They don't want to hold Bitcoin. Some will, but the main ones, right? Christine Lagarde says no European central bank will hold Bitcoin. So what else is there? They're going to hold Ethereum. Ethereum is not this global network to connect CBDCs. So what is left? What is left? All right. I hope you enjoyed the video, guys. If you got any value, you can like the video, share the video, whatever you want to do. Thank you so much.